When my mother-in-law clasped my hands on my wedding day and said, "You're family now, my dear," I believed her. I remember her perfume, soft and powdery like rose water and linen, clinging to my dress as she hugged me. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she were handing over a crown she was proud to share. I thought that moment sealed something sacred between us. A promise of love, a promise of belonging. But promises, I later learned, can be rewritten, just like wills. That day, sunlight poured through the church windows, catching the gold threads on her shawl. She looked every bit the matriarch she was, elegant, poised, and fiercely proud of her family name. I thought she was welcoming me into that pride. What I didn't realize was that she was only loaning me her warmth. It was conditional, like most of her kindness. My husband, Daniel, was her only son, her favorite topic, her soft spot, her entire world. He had that same gentle steadiness she carried, but where she was sharp and decisive, he was calm and kind. I used to tease him that he was the refined version of her edges smoothed by patience. For years, our life together was easy. We lived in a modest home not far from hers. She'd drop by with baskets of fruit or leftover roast chicken wrapped in foil, insisting that a wife shouldn't have to cook every night. Sometimes she'd stay for tea and tell stories about Daniel's childhood, the time he climbed the neighbor's fence to rescue a kitten, or when he cried for hours because she missed a school play. Her voice always carried that faint ache of nostalgia, like a violin's last note fading into silence. I loved her then, truly. When Daniel and I had our first child, she was the first to arrive at the hospital. She took my hands, teary-eyed, and whispered, "You've given me my heart all over again." She called me her daughter, and I let her. I wanted to be hers, part of that tightly woven family fabric she'd so carefully maintained. Our Sundays became ritual. Lunch at her house, linen napkins, laughter, her famous pot roast. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Claire, always came later, usually in a rush, her perfume trailing in first. She was the free spirit, the one who'd moved to the city to find herself. She was polite, but detached, floating around the conversation as if the family orbit didn't quite hold her. But over the years, though, I noticed little shifts, subtle things. The way my mother-in-law's compliments started coming with tiny barbs. "You're such a good mother, though I do wish you'd learn my roast recipe properly." Or, "Daniel looks tired. You must be keeping him busy, hmm?" They were small words, but they cut deeper than they should have. Still, I told myself it was love, just dressed in her way, the kind that fusses instead of praises. When Daniel's father passed away, she leaned on me more than ever. I was proud of how much she trusted me, with her grocery lists, her doctor's appointments, even her bills. I'd sit at her kitchen table going through stacks of envelopes while she brewed coffee and told me stories about her youth. She used to be just like you, bright-eyed, always trying to make everyone happy. I should have listened more carefully to what came after that. But people like us, we get tired when nobody notices. At the time, I thought she was reminiscing. I didn't realize she was warning me. Life felt stable for years after that. Our children grew, Daniel's career flourished, and we made it a point to include her in everything. Birthdays, school plays, even vacations. She would sit in the living room with the kids, telling them stories of when Daddy was your age. It filled me with something close to peace. Then, around her 75th birthday, she fell ill. It started with fatigue, then fainting spells. We took her to doctors, ran tests, adjusted her diet. Daniel was worried sick. I stepped in where I could, cooking, cleaning, handling appointments. I visited nearly every day, bringing her soup, helping her sort medications. She called me her angel, her second daughter. And then one day, her tone shifted. It was subtle, a sharpness in her eyes, a pause before she said my name. I brushed it off at first, assuming it was the medication or her frustration with growing weaker. But there was something else there, something quietly resentful, like she was holding a grudge she hadn't spoken out loud. One afternoon, I arrived at her house and found Claire already there, her laughter echoing down the hallway. I hadn't heard that sound in years. Carefree, confident. When I walked in, both of them went silent. There was a tension in the air, the kind you can't quite see but you feel, like static before a storm. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here," I said softly, setting the soup down on the counter. Claire smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Just catching up with Mom. We were talking about some paperwork." Paperwork. The word hung there like a riddle. My mother-in-law looked at me, almost apologetically, then quickly changed the subject. "Thank you for the soup, dear. Claire's helping me with a few things today. You go rest. You've done enough for everyone lately." I remember blinking, feeling a faint sting in my chest. "You've done enough for everyone lately." It sounded like dismissal. That night when Daniel came home, I asked if he knew what paperwork they'd been discussing. He frowned and said, "Probably something about her estate. She's been reorganizing her accounts with Claire. She said it's just to make things easier for us later." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something inside me whispered that it wasn't for us. It was about us. In the weeks that followed, the house seemed to change. When I'd visit, she'd already be on the phone with Claire, speaking in hushed tones. She stopped asking me to sort her mail. When I tried to help with her bills, she waved me off, saying, "Claire's handling that now." I told myself it was fine, that she deserved to lean on her daughter. But I couldn't shake the unease building in my chest. It was like standing in a house you've lived in for years and realizing the furniture isn't yours anymore. One Sunday, she called us all for lunch. She said she had something important to share. I cooked extra dishes, brought her favorite dessert, and told the kids to behave. I wanted it to be a happy gathering. Maybe she was feeling better, maybe she just wanted everyone together again. But when we arrived, Claire was already there, sitting beside her, holding a manila folder. And I noticed, for the first time, that my name wasn't on any of the papers on the table. Not even once. There are moments that change the temperature of a room without anyone moving a muscle. That Sunday afternoon was one of them. My mother-in-law's dining table had always been a place of warmth, full of clinking silverware, chatter, and the smell of roast chicken. But that day it felt sterile. The air was too still, the light too sharp, as if the house itself had stopped breathing. Daniel helped her to her seat while I carried dishes from the kitchen, trying to ignore the manila folder sitting between her and Claire. My youngest son reached for a biscuit, and I smiled, pretending everything was normal, pretending I didn't feel a quiet dread blooming inside me. When everyone had their plates, she cleared her throat. "I wanted to talk to you all about some family matters," she said, her tone measured, like she was reading from script. Claire folded her arms and nodded, encouraging her. Daniel smiled kindly. "Mom, you didn't have to make this formal. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." She glanced at him, then at me. "I've been reviewing my affairs. Just to be responsible, you know. I spoke to a lawyer, made some updates to the will. Nothing dramatic, just clarifications." I felt the air tighten around my ribs. "Oh," I said lightly, keeping my voice even. "That's a good idea. It's smart to get everything in order." She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that warms you. It was thin, rehearsed. "Yes, I simply wanted everyone to know so there aren't surprises later." I caught a flicker of hesitation in her eyes before she looked at Claire. Then she reached for the folder, tapping it twice with her manicured fingers. Claire has been helping me make sure everything goes to the right place. The right place. She didn't say, to the family. She said, the right place. I noticed then that she wouldn't meet my eyes. Later that evening, after the dishes were washed and the kids asleep, I sat beside Daniel in bed. The TV flickered blue light across his face, but his expression was far away. "Did you notice how strange she was today?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "She's getting older, honey. These things make her anxious. Claire's good with paperwork. She's probably just taking the burden off Mom." I wanted to believe him. I always wanted to believe him. But there was something about the way Claire looked at me at that table, confident, almost triumphant, that made my stomach twist. "She said she made updates. Did she tell you what kind?" He hesitated. "No, but I'm sure it's nothing bad." He turned back to the TV, trying to let the conversation die there. But I couldn't. The thought lingered all night, prickling behind my eyes until sleep felt impossible. A week later, I stopped by her house unannounced. I told myself I was just checking in, she'd sounded tired on the phone, but really, I was chasing a feeling I couldn't shake. When I let myself in with the spare key, the living room was quiet. Afternoon light spilled across the carpet. I called out softly, "Mom, it's me." No answer. I found her in the study, sitting at her desk with papers spread across it. She startled when she saw me in the doorway. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." "I brought you some tea." I set the thermos down. She smiled weakly, then began gathering the papers into a stack. "Thank you, dear. You're always so thoughtful." Something inside me told me not to look, not to betray her trust, but my eyes flicked, just for a second, across the papers before she covered them. I caught my own name, or rather, the absence of it. Where there had once been Daniel and his wife, it now read only Daniel. I froze, the words burning into my mind. I forced a smile. "Do you need help organizing those?" She shook her head. "Claire's been helping. She's quite capable when she applies herself." I nodded, slowly. "Of course." She must have sensed something in my expression because her tone softened. "Please don't take offense, dear. This isn't about you. It's just... I need to make sure my daughter is secure. After all, she doesn't have what you have. A steady husband, a home, children. I need to look after her." It was said with so much calm that for a moment I couldn't even process it as cruelty. But then it sunk in. I was being erased. Quietly. Neatly. Like I'd never belonged at all. That evening, I stood at the sink washing dishes, my hands trembling under the running water. Daniel came in behind me and kissed my shoulder. "You're quiet," he said softly. I turned off the tap. "She changed the will, didn't she?" He froze. I could tell by the way his body stiffened before he turned me around. "She told me she was thinking about it, but she's not doing anything unfair. She just wants to make sure things are balanced." "Balanced?" I repeated, a bitter laugh slipping out. "Daniel, she's cutting me out entirely." He frowned. "How do you know that?" "I saw it. I didn't mean to, but I saw it. My name, gone." He rubbed his forehead. "You shouldn't have been snooping, love. Mom's entitled to make her decisions." His words hit harder than I expected. I stepped back, drying my hands on a towel that suddenly felt heavy and damp. Her decisions? After everything I've done for her? I've spent years helping her, taking care of her, when Claire didn't even call, and now that she's ill, Claire swoops in and... He cut me off gently. "It's her right. Please don't make this into something bigger than it is."
But to me, it already was bigger. It wasn't about the money. It was about the betrayal. The way she'd made me believe I was her daughter. The way she'd said, "You're family now." And now with one signature, she'd rewritten history, removing me as easily as crossing out a name on paper. That night, I sat on the porch long after Daniel went to bed. The sky was heavy with stars, but I didn't feel their comfort. I thought of all the moments I'd spent by her side, spooning soup into her hands, trimming her roses, reading her mail. I thought of the times she'd called me her angel. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I mistook obligation for love. But one thing I knew, this quiet betrayal wouldn't stay hidden forever. Because love, when betrayed, doesn't vanish. It transforms. And I could feel it already. The beginning of something colder, sharper, more determined rising in me.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her handwriting. Elegant, slanted, precise. The same handwriting that once wrote birthday cards addressed to "my dear daughter." Now it wrote me out of existence. By sunrise, I decided I couldn't let it sit. I wasn't after her money. It wasn't even about the will. It was about what it meant. I'd built my life around the belief that love in this family was unconditional. And now I saw the truth. It had been a contract. One I didn't realize could expire. The next afternoon, I went back to her house. I didn't tell Daniel. He'd only try to stop me, or worse, tell me to keep the peace. She was sitting in her garden, wearing a soft blue sweater, pruning her roses. The autumn air carried that faint smell of soil and rain. It should have been a peaceful scene, but my heart was pounding. "Mom," I said, stepping onto the patio. She looked up, smiling faintly. "Oh, hello, dear. I wasn't expecting you." I walked closer, steady but calm. "I wanted to talk to you. About the will." Her pruning shears paused midair. After a long silence, she sighed, setting them down beside her. "Daniel told you." "I saw it," I said quietly. "My name's gone." She didn't look surprised, just tired. "You shouldn't have looked at private papers." I didn't mean to, but I think I deserve to understand why. Her eyes, once soft with affection, turned guarded. "You've misunderstood, dear. This isn't about affection. It's about family responsibility. My daughter doesn't have what you have. She's alone. You have Daniel. You have a home. You're taken care of. So I'm being punished for building a stable life?" Her lips tightened. "Don't twist my words. I love you dearly, but the bloodline has to be protected. That's just how things are." Bloodline. The word hit me like a slap. After all these years, after I cared for you, stood by you, treated you like my own mother, you still see me as other? She looked away, focusing on a rosebud between her fingers. "You've always been good to me," she murmured, "but love doesn't change lineage." I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet devastation of porcelain splitting down the middle. "Then you shouldn't have called me your daughter," I said. My voice came out small, trembling. "You shouldn't have said, 'You're family now.'" For the first time, she looked at me, really looked at me. There was something almost like regret in her eyes. "Perhaps I said it because I wanted it to be true," she murmured. "But people change when they grow old. They think differently." "People don't change. They reveal themselves." She didn't answer. She turned back to her roses, clipping a thorny stem with deliberate care.
The sound of metal snipping through the air echoed between us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she'd broken something sacred. But instead, I stood there in silence, because deep down I knew yelling wouldn't fix anything. Her mind was made up. And yet, as I walked away, she called after me, softly, almost too softly. "Don't take it personally, dear. It's just business." Business. That word followed me home like a ghost. Over the next few days, something shifted in me. I stopped dropping by her house. I stopped picking up her prescriptions. Daniel noticed the distance, but didn't press it. Maybe he didn't want to face what it meant. Claire, on the other hand, started visiting more often. She'd post cheerful pictures of herself and their mother on social media, captions like, "Cherishing every moment with Mom," as if she hadn't been absent for half her life. Each post felt like a knife twist. I'd scroll past them, jaw clenched, heart heavy. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, the phone rang. Daniel answered. I could hear the muffled conversation from the kitchen, his tone tight, restrained. Then, "Okay, we'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up, looking pale. Mom fell. She's at the hospital. When we arrived, Claire was already there, pacing the hallway. Her mascara had smudged slightly, but she still managed to look perfectly put together. "She tripped in the garden," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. "The doctor said she'll be fine, but she'll need help at home for a while." Daniel put his arm around her. "We'll figure it out." Then Claire looked at me. "Actually, Mom mentioned she'd like me to stay with her for a bit. Said she didn't want to inconvenience you." I blinked. "Inconvenience me?" She gave a sweet smile. "You have the kids, the house, everything to manage. Don't worry, I'll handle Mom." The way she said it, like she was claiming territory, made my stomach tighten. But I said nothing. Because I realized in that moment, I wasn't fighting for approval anymore. I was watching them rewrite history in real time. And I decided, silently, that I wouldn't stop them. Not yet. Sometimes the only way to see people's true faces is to let them believe you've given up. Over the next month, Claire moved into her mother's house full-time. She started overseeing her care, arranging appointments, managing the finances. From the outside, she looked like the perfect daughter. And my mother-in-law, for her part, seemed happier than she had in months. Glowing, almost smug. Daniel visited often, but each time he came back quieter, distant, like he was caught between two tides. Then one evening, he came home with an envelope in his hand. He placed it on the table, wordless. "What's this?" I asked. Mom's lawyer sent it. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's official. She changed the will. Everything goes to Claire. The house, the investments, even the jewelry." I opened the envelope, scanning the neat legal language until the words blurred. I'd prepared myself for this moment, but it still felt like the ground slipping from under me. "She didn't even leave you anything?" I whispered. He shook his head. "No, just a note saying she trusts Claire to do what's right." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. "Do what's right? She's already done what's convenient." Daniel sighed, eyes heavy. "Please, don't start this again. It's done. Let it go." Let it go. The phrase echoed in my head all night. But letting go felt too much like surrender. I'd been quiet, polite, patient, the good daughter-in-law who smiled through humiliation. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't going to fight for money or a name on a piece of paper. I was going to fight for truth. And the truth was this: love built on conditions is not love at all.
I didn't tell anyone what I planned to do. Not Daniel, not even my sister. I just started showing up again. Every morning, after dropping the kids at school, I'd drive to her house with a thermos of ginger tea, the kind she used to love. I'd knock, and when Claire answered, her face would fall. Just slightly. "Oh, it's you." "Yes," I'd say with a calm smile. "I thought I'd check on Mom." She'd step aside reluctantly, letting me in with that stiff politeness only people who think they're winning can afford. My mother-in-law would be in the living room, wrapped in a pale cardigan, her thin hands folded neatly over her lap. "Good morning," I'd say, setting the thermos on the coffee table. She'd look at me, cautious, uncertain. "You didn't have to come." "I know," I'd say softly, "but I wanted to." I didn't bring up the will, not once. Instead, I talked about her garden, about the weather, about how Daniel missed her soup. I refilled her teacup, adjusted her blanket. I sat quietly when she didn't feel like talking. At first, she kept her distance. Her responses clipped and polite. But as the days turned into weeks, her tone softened. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe it was the quiet weight of time reminding her that blood isn't the only thing that binds people. Sometimes it's memory. One afternoon, I found her sitting by the window, watching the street outside. The winter light spilled over her face, soft and gray. She looked tired, smaller somehow. She said, "I saw your car coming. You don't give up easily, do you?" I smiled faintly. "No, ma'am, I suppose I don't." She chuckled under her breath. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, stubborn, proud." I hesitated, then said quietly, "You know, when you told me I was family, I believed you." Her eyes flickered, not away, but into something deeper, quieter. "I meant it then." "What changed?" Her lips pressed together. The clock on the wall ticked steadily between us. "Fear," she whispered finally. "When you get old, you start thinking about things differently. About who will carry your name, who will look after what you've built. Claire, she's my blood, and even though she's made mistakes, I thought she deserved a chance to prove herself." I nodded slowly. "And you didn't think I'd understand that?" "I didn't want you to be hurt, but I knew you would be." "You were right," I said simply. "It did hurt. More than I thought it could." She reached for her teacup, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you hate me for it?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The fine lines on her face, the small tremor in her fingers, the sadness that never quite reached her voice. "No," I said, finally. "I don't hate you. But I can't be what I was before." She nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting that answer. "That's fair," she said. Over the next few months, I kept my visits steady but measured. I was kind but not compliant, present but not dependent. I spoke with her, not for her. And that shift, that quiet boundary, began to change everything. Claire started noticing it too. She'd watch me from the kitchen doorway whenever I came by. Her smiles grew tighter, her tone sharper. One day, as I was leaving, she followed me out to the porch. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Her arms were crossed, her earrings catching the sunlight. She said, "Why do you keep coming here? Mom's made her choice. You don't have to prove anything." I met her gaze. "I'm not proving anything, Claire.
I'm remembering who I am." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I don't need a signature on a will to define my place in this family. I earned it long before you came back." Her expression faltered for just a moment. Then she gave a small, brittle laugh. "You really think she'll ever see you the same way?" I smiled, calm and even. "Maybe not, but I'll sleep better knowing I didn't let bitterness make me small." She blinked, caught off guard by the gentleness in my voice. And for the first time, she didn't have a response. Weeks later, my mother-in-law's health took a turn. It wasn't sudden, just a slow, steady fading, like the last candle in a quiet room. When Daniel and I visited, she asked to speak to me alone. I sat beside her, holding her frail hand. She said, "There's something I want you to have." Her voice was thin but steady. She reached into the bedside drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a gold brooch, shaped like a lily. I'd seen her wear it every Easter for years. She said, "My husband gave me this on our 10th anniversary. It's not worth much, but it's a reminder that love, when it's real, endures." My throat tightened. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can," she said firmly, "because it doesn't belong to the person who inherits my things. It belongs to the one who understood me, even when I was wrong." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You're not wrong, Mom. You just—" She stopped me with a soft shake of her head. "No, dear. I was. I thought love meant control. But you showed me it's something else. Something freer." She smiled faintly. "And if you're wondering, yes, I changed the will again. But not for you. For peace. Everything's divided equally now." I blanked, shocked. "You didn't have to." "She did," she said gently, "because I needed to leave this world without regrets." For the first time in months, the tension in my chest eased. Not because of the will, that was never the point, but because she finally saw me. Truly saw me. When she passed a few weeks later, the house felt unbearably quiet. At the funeral, Claire cried beside me, her mascara streaked. She didn't look at me much, but when she did, there was something different in her eyes. Not affection, not even apology, but recognition. And that was enough. After everyone left, I stood alone by the grave, the winter air biting at my cheeks. The gold brooch was pinned to my coat, catching the pale sunlight. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the long road back to understanding. And I realized something. Sometimes respect isn't given because of love. Sometimes it's love that teaches people what respect should mean.
In the weeks after the funeral, the family gathered often. There were estate matters to settle, of course, but also the simple gravity of grief, the way it pulls people together, even as it pulls them apart. Claire took the lead on most of the paperwork. She had the lawyer's number, the keys to Pouse, and the confidence of someone who'd always known her place. I, on the other hand, stayed quiet. I cooked for the guests, helped with flowers, cleaned the kitchen when no one noticed. But something had changed. Whenever I spoke, people listened, not out of obligation, but out of genuine regard. Daniel's aunts, who once only smiled politely at me, now sought my opinion. Neighbors who'd come to pay respects hugged me, whispering, "She always spoke so fondly of you." It surprised me. I hadn't realized my mother-in-law had spoken of me at all in her last weeks. The will reading took place 2 weeks later in her living room. The air felt thick, like the house itself was holding its breath. The lawyer, an older gentleman with kind eyes, unfolded the papers carefully. Claire sat across from him, jaw tight.
Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting over mine. I, Margaret Lynn Hartwell, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this my final will and testament. His voice droned gently, reading through the formalities, debts, funeral costs, and then the division of assets. When he reached the distribution section, the room went utterly still. To my daughter, Claire, I leave the family home and half of my remaining estate. To my son, Daniel, I leave the property shares and family accounts as outlined in Appendix B. He paused, glanced up briefly, then continued. And to my daughter-in-law, Mara, my name. It sounded strange, soft and careful in that silence. I leave my jewelry collection, including the gold lily brooch and the Hartwell Scholarship Fund under her direction, to be used in her discretion for causes she finds worthy. I felt everyone's eyes turn toward me. The room seemed to shrink. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Hartwell requested that I include a personal note to be read aloud. He unfolded a separate sheet of paper. The handwriting was familiar. Careful loops, faintly shaky. My dear Mara, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. I want you to know that I was wrong to measure love by blood. You have been my daughter in every way that mattered. This is not about money, but about trust. You showed me grace when I least deserved it. Please use what I've left to bring light to others, the way you brought it to me. The air in the room felt heavy with emotion. Claire stared at the floor, her face unreadable. Daniel squeezed my hand gently, whispering, she meant every word. I couldn't speak. My throat closed around the swell of emotion, grief, forgiveness, and something like peace. The weeks that followed were a blur of gratitude and quiet repair. Claire and I didn't suddenly become friends. That kind of wound doesn't heal overnight. But she started calling, first about logistics, then about smaller things. Do you know what she meant about the flower arrangements in the backyard? She asked once. I said, she planted peonies every spring. She wanted them to bloom after Easter. She paused. Right. I'll make sure they do. Small things, but meaningful. One Saturday morning, months later, I stood in the garden of my own home, pruning the hydrangeas. Daniel came out with 2 cups of coffee. Guess who called? He said, handing me one. Claire? He smiled. She wants us to come over. She's having people at the old house, a small dinner to honor Mom. She said she'd like you to bring your soup. I laughed softly. That soup again? He said, it was Mom's favorite. That night we went. The house looked warm again. Candles flickering, laughter echoing faintly through the halls. Claire greeted me at the door. There was still that quiet awkwardness between us, but also something gentler. She said, I'm glad you came. So am I replied. As the evening went on, stories flowed easily. We laughed about the old days, her mother's stubbornness, the time she burned a roast but insisted it was smoked meat. We even cried a little, but softly, without shame. When I got up to leave, Claire followed me to the door again, just like before. Only this time, her voice was softer. You know, Mom was right about you. You didn't just keep this family together, you gave it back its heart. I smiled, touched, but careful not to break the fragile peace between us. She gave us all the chance to start over. Claire nodded, and for the first time, she hugged me. Briefly, but sincerely. The months turned into a year. Life settled again. Quieter, steadier. The scholarship fund was established, just as my mother-in-law had wanted. We used it to help young women from our community study nursing, a tribute to the care she always valued, even when pride got in the way. Sometimes when I read their thank you letters, I thought of her voice, that firm, elegant tone softening near the end. You have been my daughter in every way that mattered. And I'd smile, whispering a small prayer of thanks, because in the end, this wasn't a story about wills or money or inheritance. It was about something much simpler and much harder. Learning that love without respect is fragile, and respect without love is hollow. It takes both, together, to build something that lasts.
When I look back now, I realize that what hurt me most wasn't losing the inheritance. It was losing the illusion that love alone could keep me safe. For a long time, I thought being kind, being loyal, being family was enough. But sometimes, even the people who claim to love you will test the edges of your worth. And when they do, you have two choices: to shrink or to stand in quiet dignity. I chose the latter, because dignity, unlike inheritance, can't be taken from you. It's something you decide to keep, even when others try to make you feel small. My mother-in-law taught me that, in her own flawed way. She wasn't evil, she was human, scared, proud, and trying to control what she thought she was losing. But the truth is, control is never the same as love. Love is softer. It's in the mornings you show up even when you're hurt. It's in the words you choose not to say. It's in the courage to forgive, not because they earned it, but because you deserve peace. In the end, I didn't get a title in her will because I was married to her son. I got something far better: the quiet knowing that I stayed true to myself. And if that's not inheritance, I don't know what is. Sometimes life won't hand you justice in the way you expect. Sometimes it'll give you something quieter: understanding, respect, peace. And you'll find that's enough. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have stayed to earn back her respect? Or would you have walked away for good? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if my story reminded you of something from your own life, don't forget to share it in the comments. Because in the end, we all have a story that taught us what family really means.